Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to the latest episode of the Hard Compound Live. This is episode number 199, if you can believe it. For those of you who don't know, my name's Rich, and I run and operate the Hard Compound. We're a one-stop shop for all things motorsport, and we can be found on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and on YouTube. So if you search for the Hard Compound on any of those platforms, we'd love to have you on board. We're here to share a love of motorsport, nothing else, no controversy. No controversy, no nonsense, just a love of motorsport. And we do that through 3 written articles every day. These go out about 9 o'clock in the morning in the UK, 2 p.m. in the UK, and about 8:30 p.m. in the UK. And we cover everything from F1 to IndyCar to sports cars, rallying bikes, touring cars, and everything in between. These articles take the form of race reviews, race previews, throwbacks, birthdays, breaking news, favourite liveries, and anything else that we can shake a stick at. So, as I said, come along and join in the fun. We'd love to have you on board. In case you hadn't noticed, we also do live video interviews just like this one. And just like this one, these go out on our Facebook, our Twitter, and our YouTube channel. They're saved in the video section on Facebook and in the live section on YouTube. As I said, we've had some fantastic guests in the past. I'm just going to name a few of them from across the motorsport spectrum. We've spoken to the likes of Mr. Mario Andretti and Jackie Ickx and Chip Ganassi, Jackie Oliver, David Brabham, Stefan Johansson, Derek Warwick, Brian Redman, Hans Stuck, Peter Solberg, touring car racers such as Gabriele Tarquini, Rickard Rydell, Steve Soper, Ivan Muller, Jason Plato, F1 drivers and others. People like Ukio Katayama, Mika Salo, David Brabham, Carl Wendlinger, Emanuele Pirro, Ralph Furman last week, Todd Hazelwood, Oliver Gavin, Mr. Nick Yellerly, and we've spoken to a few drivers who have done IndyCar, which is very well linked to this evening, which we're going to come to you very shortly. Spoken to the likes of Mr. Mark Blundell, Catherine Legg, Alex Tagliani, Will Power, Alex Palou, Raul Boissel, Roberto Guerrero, Eddie Chivo, Ari Leyendijk. Legends like Paul Page and Alonso Jr., Don Cusick's been on, Takuma Sato, Kenny Brack as well. So if you want to see those, do head to the channels that I've mentioned and watch them back. But don't go just yet, because we are joined with basically one of my heroes from when I was a kid. He's raced in Formula One, he's raced in IndyCar, NASCAR, he's raced at Le Mans. He's an Indy 500 winner as a driver and as a team owner. And he's also a 3-time IndyCar champion, and his team also competes in IMSA and other series as well. So without any further ado, we're going to bring him in. Please join me in extending a very, very warm welcome to the legend that is Bobby Rahal.
Good evening. Good evening.
Bobby, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, the biggest thanks goes to you for coming on. I appreciate you're very, very busy and you've got a lot on your hands. So I really appreciate you coming on to be our 199th guest. So thank you very, very much indeed.
You're very welcome.
Great stuff. Right. Okay. First, we're going to come to the chat in just a moment, but there's a few people tuning in already across Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. The technology is working. Hello to you all. If you have any questions or comments, do pop them into the comment section on your chosen platform, and we'll work them into the chat as we go, or just have a chat amongst yourselves, whatever you like. Right. Okay. That's the housekeeping done. Excuse me. Firstly, Bobby, how's everything going this year? It's been another very busy year, hasn't it?
Very busy. We have one more race left. Of course, that's in IMSA at Petit Le Mans this next week.
Yes.
But it's been quite busy, but it's always busy. You know, there's whether it's racing season or non-racing season, it's 24/7, 365, right? So, there's never a dull moment. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely right. And firstly, I think this evening, just because the followers of the page and everything, it's going to be quite F1 and IndyCar centric, but that's no problem. Right. I love my IndyCar, and one of our one of our young Brits has done very well for you this year. Obviously, Louis
Yeah,
Foster.
yeah.
He's done a terrific job, hasn't he?
I've been very pleased with Louis. I mean, of course, I was impressed, with his championship run in Indy Next, this last year in 2024. And I have to say that, right from the start this year, he was quick. He had pace right off the bat. It took a few races to get him comfortable in the car. But once we did that, he qualified almost every race in the top 10, a pole position at Road America, a number of good runs. Some little issues here and there in the races, some of which were probably our failures to do some things in a different way. But in the end, showed great competitiveness. And so we're excited he's going to be back next year. And I think 1 year later, a lot more experience to deal, to rely upon, and is going to know the car better, get to know the races. Prior to this year, the longest race he'd run was like 45 minutes to an hour, I think. And of course, IndyCar races are, for the most part, 2 hours or more. And of course, Indianapolis 500 is, 3 generally. So, so in any event, I thought he did a very good job, and we're glad he's back, and we're looking forward to 2026.
Yeah, absolutely with you on that. And I think with so many changes, driver swaps and everything and things going on in IndyCar, that kind of continuity that you have in the team for next year is going to be a big thing. I think it's going to really help out. There's certain champions moving around and youngsters coming through and switching across. So it should be a good year, and looking forward to see how you guys get on, of course.
Yes.
Obviously, we'll come to the team as quickly as we can. But firstly, I want to talk with you and your career and your journey behind the wheel. You're from like northern Ohio, or the north of Ohio. Where did the interest in motorsport come from for you?
Well, for me, yes, I was born in northern Ohio, not far from Cleveland, Ohio, but at a very young age, my family moved to the Chicago area. So I really was raised in Chicago up through my years in university. But how I got introduced to it, and don't ask me why or how my father had this interest, because there was nothing in his background that would say to you, oh, yeah, that's why he got involved in racing. He had come out of World War II. In the 1950s, probably like a lot of veterans who had been, especially those who had been to Europe, to England, saw what a MG was, or an Austin Healey, or a Jaguar, or whatever. Anyway, he was in the South Pacific, but he came back, and I think the 50s was an explosive period of time in America, at least for automobiles and for automobile racing. So he started racing about 1958. So I would have been 5 years old at the time. And so all through the late 50s, all through the 60s, even the early 70s, he was racing purely as an amateur. He was not a professional driver, although we did do Sebring 12-hour, Watkins Glen 6-hour races later on. But in any event, growing up as a boy and then a teenager, my summers were going racing, with my dad, and at places like Mid Ohio or Road America or Watkins Glen or various tracks like that. So that was an amazing period, especially the 60s, just an amazing decade of racing, with the Can-Am series and Formula 5000 and Trans Am. And of course I'd go to Elkhart, and I'd watch Bruce McLaren and Denny Hulme and Jim Hall, all the great drivers, Mario.
Wouldn't it?
I mean, it was an amazing period of time. And of course, but in my family, if you raced, you did it as a hobby. You did not race as a profession. My family was you got your education, and then hopefully that enabled you to get a good job, and hopefully that enabled you to go racing.
Right.
But so my expectations or aspirations were very, very humble. And, I never thought I'd even race, let alone when I first started in 1973 in SCCA racing. in an old Lotus 47 that was well past its prime at that time. But still, it was a race car, and I was out racing. And so, so my baptism really in racing really came through my father. Of course, my love for automobiles came through my father. And that's really how, that kind of lit the flame, and the flame burned brighter and brighter. And in 73, as I said, he had an old Lotus, and he said, "Hey, if you want to get your amateur license, your SCCA license, go ahead and take the car." And so I got my racing license in May of 73.
Wow.
And did only a couple amateur races that summer in between my years in university. But I started winning some races. Now these were, at the lowest level that you could get to. So it's not a lot. You can't brag too much about that. But anyway, once I started racing, that passion that I had for it, burned even brighter. And so that was the start. And from there on out, it was, just kind of sometimes a gradual, sometimes a not so gradual increase in my experience in motorsports, and at bigger and bigger levels.
Yeah. And I just love some of the circuits you named there, because obviously to us Brits over here, there's some absolutely legendary circuits there, and some of the names as well. I mean, you can't help but get the bug, I think, for racing, and obviously with it being in the family and everything.
Yeah.
But I always like to ask, do you remember the first race that you did and how you felt beforehand? Were you thinking, I want to win this thing, or I just want to survive?
Probably a little bit of both. My first race was in May of 73 at a track that no longer exists, a track called Mid-America Raceway. That was right outside St. Louis, Missouri. And my dad had actually raced there in the late 60s and early 70s. So I had gone to that track as a spectator crew member. And it was a very interesting circuit, had a very long straightaway, a lot of elevation change. The first turn, after a long straight, the first turn was a 90-degree, very slow right-hand turn. So a lot of drama in that corner over the years. So I did on Saturday of that weekend, I went to my driver's school. And in those days, they didn't have racing schools or driving schools like you see today. There was no Bob Bondurant, there was no Skip Barber, no Jim Russell, none of that. It was on the job training, right? You got it in a car and learned how to drive a race car, hopefully.
Wow.
And so the driver's school was on Saturday, and I guess I didn't embarrass myself when they agreed to let me race on Sunday for my first SCCA, what they call regional race, which is the lowest rung on the ladder. And I qualified second. Now that sounds really great, but here I'm in a Lotus, even though it was 7 years old at the time. I'm in a Lotus, but most of the cars that were on the grid with me were, again, some of them were amateur drivers, most were amateur drivers, some were rookies like I was, and they were driving MGs and Triumphs, and maybe there was one or two Formula. It was kind of a what we call run what you brung. It was kind of a little bit of everything, Formula Ford, you name it. And anyway, the guy on the pole was a guy, pretty well known guy from that area, that had a 289 Cobra. He had raced it for many years at that point. And anyway, I didn't finish. I didn't win. I finished second to him, but I managed not to crash the car. I managed not to tear it up. I managed not to hurt myself. And so, that's a pretty good start. I thought I was first in my class, although to this day, I can't tell you how many cars there were in my class. Probably not too many, but nevertheless. So it was kind of a win, but a second place. And so, you left pretty energized by the whole experience. And so, then it was on to the next one, when can we do the next one? And, but certainly after I had done that race, now you knew a little bit more what to expect. Again, I had never really driven a racing car of that type. So, and it certainly seemed to be a fast car at the time, but when you're a newbie, as we call a new guy, you don't really know what to expect, right? And so it was a great experience, and I couldn't wait to get back in the car and do it again.
Yeah, and after that result and that experience, the bug bites even harder, I assume, and you were like absolutely on this racing thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bug had already bitten. I later on, as you know, I co-drove with Brian Redmond.
Yeah,
and Brian was quite helpful to me in my career. And of course, that time I saw him. He was driving the 917 Porsche. He was driving Formula 5000 cars. And Brian was a hero, is still a hero of mine. And Jim Clark had been my hero growing up. So in any event, the bug had bitten, and all it took was to actually get in the car and go. And I'm just thankful that it certainly worked out far better than I ever had imagined. And so it was a great experience.
Kind of hasn't gone too badly. And just a quick word on Brian. I mean, Brian came on here for a chat maybe like 2 years ago, and just an absolutely stand-up guy, isn't he? Just a lovely guy, and hugely underrated.
And I think one of the most underappreciated, undervalued drivers in the history of the sport. I mean, he won in everything. He was competitive in Formula. He did a few Formula One races, was competitive. Of course, again, the 917s, the only guy to be asked by Ferrari twice to drive for them. He did F2 cars, and then he went to the 3-liter sports cars, and just a super guy. And as I said, he and I, we won a couple of races together, and just had a lot of admiration for not just Brian, the driver, but Brian, the person. And really, he hasn't changed a bit, over the years.
Yeah, he's still a great character, and he's still sharp as a tack, isn't he? Which is great.
Yeah.
No, that's lovely, really lovely. And we'll come to that race, the time you spent racing with him shortly. I have just seen in the comments, Keith Mail. Good evening, Keith, tuning in on Facebook. He's just given us a bit of a teaser here. He said 5 years from starting to getting into F1. That's impressive.
Right.
Absolutely right. That wouldn't happen today. I was fascinated by the journey though. I mean, obviously you said that you started racing there. Was it you won? Was it the runoffs? I think that was
75. Yeah,
75.
Right.
Well, the runoffs went into Formula Atlantic Canada, things like that. How did things progress? Because you had Formula Atlantic Canada, Formula Atlantic IMSA.
Right.
There was some chap called Gilles Villeneuve was knocking around. How did that all come to be from that first race to going into those series?
Well, all right. So at the end of towards the end of 73, I'd done a couple races, and of course our car, I think when the Lotus 47 came out, it was 1967 when it was new, and now we're talking 6-7 years later, and I just probably kept bugging my father saying we need to get something newer. And he did not, he never liked open wheel cars. So he was always driving sports cars. He had, during his era, he had driven production cars and, Alfa Romeos and Austin Healey's and things like that. But in 1967, he bought an Elva Porsche. So Elva being an English chassis with the Porsche engine. And even at that point, that was 3 or 4 years from new, but he started racing sports racing cars at that time. And so in 67, we had the Elva Porsche. He ran that 68. At the end of 68, he bought a Carrera 6 Porsche. So kind of the die was cast as far as the types of cars that he was going to drive. I tried to convince him to get a Formula Ford or something like that, because that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to drive sports cars, but I could never get him to do that. He thought they were dangerous and all that other good stuff. And so in 73, about halfway through 73, there was a Lola T290, T290, which was actually from 72, but this one had been built right at the end of 72. And it was, we bought the car from a fellow in Indiana. I did one race on it, and at the time it had a 1300cc BDA engine. So it really didn't have the right engine, but hey, it was, I'll never forget the first time I went out, I took a lap in the car, the steering wheel didn't shake. And I thought all race car steering wheels shook. That's how the difference between 73 or 72 and 67. But so I had a lot of success in that car. The end of that year, we put a 2-liter engine in the car. And so 74, now I'm running 2-liter. Now I'm running SCCA Nationals. That's the next layer up. But now I'm racing against guys like Jerry Hansen, who is a multiple SCCA national champion and everything from Formula 5000 to Can-Am to 2-liter sports cars to you name it. So I'm racing against Jerry and another fellow named Mike Hall, who had been around for quite a while and was quite a good driver. And I went to the SCCA runoffs in 74, and I ended up third. I led part of the race, but I'm in a 72 series car, and Mike had a 70, and Jerry Hansen had a 73 Lola T292, and Mike had a Lola T294. And really, I wasn't as good as they were. I managed to lead a few laps, but ended up third, right with them. It was a close race, but having now that's a much bigger stage where there's actually more public awareness, at least within the motorsports world, of these kinds of races. And of course, still I wanted to get into open wheel racing. So in the end of 74, a friend of mine from university, he was from the Schlitz Brewing family, the beer company here in the United States. He agreed to buy, we ended up buying at the end of 74, we ended up buying a Rondell F2 car. That was new in 73, so it was a year old, but it had a twin cam, Ford twin cam, not the BDA or the FVC that they ran in F2 at the time. And of course, this was one of the Ron Dennis cars of Neil Trundle. They had built this car and did one race with it, and I won the race, the SCCA National race at the end of the year. So I convinced the guy we needed to get a newer car. We went to Watkins Glen for the Formula Atlantic race that preceded the Grand Prix. And that was the Grand Prix that Fittipaldi won his second championship, I guess it would have been.
Right.
And also that's the race. During our race is when they burned that Brazilian tour bus in what they called the bog. That was during our race.
Right,
so
okay.
it's kind of, and at the same time, there's big fire, all the smoke comes up from the far end of the circuit. I'm slow to come around because I banged wheels with a guy and I had a flat tire, and that was the end of my Atlantic race there, because we didn't have any spare tires, and we wouldn't have done well anyway. But anyway, convinced my friend to let's get a Lola T360, which was the Atlantic car, which was a new car for us and brand new car. And that's why I went into 75 and went to Formula Atlantic, because at the time Formula Atlantic was really a great category here in this country. Everybody that was in it for the most part was young, trying to get their way to the top. There were some very experienced people in it as well. A guy named Bill Brack from Canada, very successful, sort of semi-pro driver, I guess you'd say. So we went into Atlantic in 75, and that's when I first met Gilles, because he had run in 74 and had a crash, broke his leg, and then came back in 75. So, so I'll never forget, we went to the first race was at Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And of course, all these guys on the grid I'd watched before, and I just thought to myself, if I could be like 10th on the grid, I'd really be happy in my first race. And I was second. I was on the front row.
Wow.
And unfortunately, we had an electrical glitch and never even made the race. Barely made it around on the pace lap. So we go to the next race at Westwood, British Columbia. And again, now I'm thinking, okay, I was maybe almost as fast as some of these guys. And then I put the car on pole there. So my first two races in Atlantic, I was first and second on the grid. That just stirs gets your blood going even more, right? And so we had a pretty good year in 75. We were a simple, little team with a lot of inexperience. Had some good races, but I also qualified for the SCCA National Championship races, and that's the race I won in 75 was the SCCA National Championship. Yeah. But again, now I'm racing against Gilles, racing against, and Jill was, he was okay then. He was fast, but, I think we were generally quicker. He had some better races than I did. But in the end, I mean, we were competitive to him, and, he and I really ran kind of up front amongst the guys with a little bit more experience. But I mean, boy, a lot of optimism about the future. And, I graduated college in 1975. And to be frank, I didn't know what I didn't know really what I wanted to do other than drive race cars. I didn't want to,
Right.
My dad had his own business. I didn't want to go work for him. And, thankfully, as I tell people, I don't know if I found racing or it found me, but whatever the case may be, now I've got people that are interested in sponsoring me, helping me further. So in 76, I went to drive for the Works March team here in the United States. A guy named Doug Shearson was the importer. And I had I was very optimistic, having come off a pretty good year in 1975. Unfortunately, the year really was a bit of a disaster. I mean, we were fast, but we had a lot of DNFs for mechanical issues. In the meantime, Gilles had gotten connected to a guy named Ray Wardell, and Ray Wardell had been at the March factory. He'd been the Formula 2 team manager. And this is not disrespectful to Gilles, because Gilles was a hell of a driver.
Of course.
But Ray Wardell took this lump of clay or this unpolished diamond that Gilles was, and polished it. And of course, Gilles in 76 had this phenomenal year, and it was from the race at Trois Rivières where James Hunt, Gilles won the race. Hunt goes back to McLaren and says, "Hey, you got to look at this guy." And of course, then he ends up driving the M23 at Silverstone that year.
Yeah, that was his one race, wasn't it, for McLaren?
Yeah, his one race, qualified extremely well. Had a water temperature gauge that failed, and he thought the engine was overheating, so he came in, and they told him, no, go back out. And so he got up and tagged on to the leaders, of which Hunt was one of them, and drove around the rest of the race right connected to him. So it really showed his pace. And I mean, Gilles was a fabulous guy, great friend, unbelievably brave. Had tremendous reactions. And so we, of course, in 77, I finished second to him in the championship, won a couple races, won a race or two. Thinking, hey, we'll keep going. So, but even in, unlike some drivers where their ascension in racing is pretty smooth, there are a lot of ups and downs for me. And I actually at the end of 1976, I was so frustrated with the year that we had that I said, screw it. I'm not going to I'm not going to chase this dream. I'm not going to waste my life. And I actually said, no, quit. I said, I'm done. And I was pretty stupid. I was 23 years old. I mean, I was young still. And then about 6 months later, my girlfriend at the time said, you're going to regret it if you don't give it a real effort. And my mechanic, who is now working at Doug Shearson's, and then at McLaren in Detroit,
right?
He said, you're crazy. You can do it, blah, blah, blah. So I got a ride in 77 with a fellow out of New York, who was on Wall Street. And he had bought the Villeneuve cars from the year before. So I drove in 77, I drove 76 marches. As I said, we won up in Canada, had some good races, ended up second in the championship to Gilles. And so again, now I'm back in it and thinking lots of good things. And but as I say, a lot of any race driver, just about any race driver will tell you, one day you're the flavor of the week, and then nobody knows your name. And don't call us, we'll call you, kind of thing. And so the next few years there was a lot of that for me. But 78 was a big year for me. I did the Tasman series in New Zealand and Atlantic with KK Rosberg, and I were teammates. And KK, I'd race against KK along with Gilles in Atlantic.
Wow.
I mean, Atlantic in Canada in 76, 7, 8 I mean, you had Danny Sullivan was in that series, of course, myself, Gilles, Keke, a guy named Tom Gloy, who ended up becoming a Trans Am champion on several occasions. And I mean, there were a lot of good drivers at the time. And I remember when I went to Monaco in '78 with the Dallara, we were pretty quick. I think we qualified third for my heat, and I was running maybe fifth in the final, and then banged wheels with a guy and bent the suspension. But people say, "Oh, well, he's just a street racing expert," because we did some of that stuff in North America at the time, besides Trois Rivières. So in any event, Atlantic really was a great training ground, very similar to Formula 3, I think. And so when I did go to Formula 3 in '78, we were able to be competitive with a lot of guys. I mean, '78 was an amazing year.
Yeah.
In F3, in Britain, you had Derek Warwick, you had PK, Nigel Mansell. I mean, it was kind of a who's who. And then I ran F2. I ran European Series, or at least a selected number of the European races. And, that was Alan Prost. That was Jan Lammers, Arie Luyendyk.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, the list goes on and on. A guy named Anders Olofsson, who was very, very quick, Swedish driver. So I mean, Atlantic was just a great training ground in the States, and I've always had a real soft spot in my heart for Atlantic, because I just really think it was kind of a great combination of of power, handling, brakes. It was kind of nicely matched, all the performance aspects of it, and so you really had to learn how to drive the car to get the most of it.
Yeah. Excuse me. I've actually got on my notes here that '78 was a very busy year for you. So I mean, you sort of did Atlantic, you're in New Zealand, as you said, you did European F3, British F3. Just a couple of things. Firstly, racing the circuits out in New Zealand or here in Europe, I mean, everyone I've spoken to, they said they're very, very different to the ones, guys who come from Europe and go and race in the States. It's vice versa. The circuits are very different, and sometimes I thought, what am I doing here? Or this is awesome, or whichever way it went. Did you have any circuits like that you thought, this is fantastic? Because I did see that you got on the podium at the Nürburgring as well, which was very cool.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my dream was to go to Formula One. My dream was to race in Europe. And here in 1978, I get the opportunity to do that, through Walter Wolf Racing.
Yeah.
In the first ever Dallara, Formula 3 car. And I remember going to Verano, Italy, where Dallara still is based. And basically Dallara was like a 3-car garage, and they were making performance parts for Fiats, and of course Ingegneri Dallara was is phenomenal man, and I built a very close relationship with him. He kind of treated me like a son in some respects. But here I am. My first race in Europe was Monaco, and in F3, and and then we go to the Nürburgring, and I finished third at the Nürburgring. I was on the podium at the Nürburgring with the car, and and then third at Austria, set the lap record at Austria, and raced Jarama, Spain, raced Dijon, France, raced. Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit. That was the year of the huge Formula 3 accident at the start.
Yes.
I got caught up in. And interesting, that year you get these names and you hear them later on. Nakajima, the guy who used to run Lotus Hondas, right? He ran over the back of me and went flipping over. And the guys who started it were PK and Derek Warwick. They're the ones who started the accident. Took out the first half of the grid. But I mean, to me, racing in Europe was everything I wanted to do. So to me, that was a heck of an experience, Monza, Italy, in Formula 3, and I just couldn't get enough, frankly, and so, and luckily it did lead to Formula 1. Unfortunately, not as long as I wished, but I got there. I didn't get there by bringing money. I got there by driving.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit proud of that, but I think, had we been given a proper, I didn't have any real adult leadership when I was over there, or adult,
Right.
and I think that if there's one thing that comes out of that period of time, and even the next year when I did F2, it's that you really need to have every other driver had some guy from their country that was well known in motorsport, kind of guiding them along. And I didn't have that. And I think that hurt at the time, but still, I can't be disappointed.
No, for sure. For sure. Excuse me. I will come on to F1 in just a second, but you just put something in my brain. You mentioned about like Derek Warwick. I actually went out for lunch 2 weeks ago with a few other guys who have been on here, one of which was Derek Warwick. The other one was Ian Flux. I don't know if you remember him.
Oh, yeah.
Flux, he said that he ran the F3 car out of West London somewhere, and he said, I have to say hello to you from Ian Flux.
Yeah. Before the British GP at Brands, before that race, they had we had the cars based at the garage where Ian was, and that was a very special time, because, like I say, we were all young, all these guys, all trying to get to F1, or get to the top, and some people made it, a lot didn't, but no, you develop friendships. Jan Lammers, I always had a good experience with him. Ari Luyendijk, Stefan Johansson. Stefan is an F3 the year I was an F3. Then he stayed and won the championship, but that year, he was, obviously a good driver. So, but and Derek Warwick, I really liked Derek. I thought he was a decent guy.
He's a good guy.
Humble guy. I mean, a guy who could drive, and a guy who really kind of made his way. I think. And there were others. There were some really special drivers that I think unfortunately got passed by. That probably should not have been passed by. A guy named just draw a blank on his name, Patrick Gaillard, who was leading the Monaco F3 race when, with a lap or two to go, DeAngelis center punched him in the Lowe's hairpin and took him out of the race, and then goes on to win the race. So there were guys like that. But anyway, in those days it was fun because it was a bit like a circus. Everybody kind of drove together and followed each other around, and camped out. I mean, it was a simpler time than today, for sure, but the racing was still great.
Yeah, for sure. I want to touch on F1 before we get to IndyCar, because there's a whole load of IndyCar we're going to talk about, which is I can't wait. But F1, this is 1978 for those who don't know. You were on board with Walter Wolf Racing and racing in Europe, things like that. How did it come about? Because I think they had one car in the 78 season, Wolf, and then they kind of added you in for the last two races.
Right.
How did you find out that you were going to race in F1, and how did it all come about?
Well, it came about. So a guy that I knew here in the States, a fellow named Rod Campbell, who was sort of head of communications, I guess is how you might describe it. They didn't have PR departments in those days. You had one guy that was, representing the team publicly. Rod did that for Walter. Rod was Canadian. Of course, Walter was a Austrian immigrant into Canada. In any event, and Rod had been involved with L&M cigarettes, and he kind of ran the Formula 5000 championship when L&M sponsored that, and of course L&M sponsored the Penske the Porsche Can-Am cars and stuff like that. So anyway, Rod came to me early in '78 and said, "Listen, Walter is going to run a Formula 3 team with the view towards a North American driving one of the cars." And I suggested to him that he should look at you. And I think what we'd like to do is we're going to probably invite 4 or 5 drivers over to Verano, to Dallara's place, and kind of have what we call the gong show. I don't know if you remember the game show here, where the guy gets up and performs, and if it's good enough, you go on. If it's not, you're done, right? So it was going to be a runoff, I guess, between 4 or 5 of us. And but prior to that test, we had the Long Beach Grand Prix in '78, and Atlantic was the preliminary race to that race. And I was on pole at the race, and then I got hit by AAL. Aya ran Formula 2, Formula 3 against me, and Atlantic against me. And then Aya works with Ericsson, I believe, Marcus Ericsson. So in any event, Aya hits me on the pace lap, and I get a flat tire. So by the time we changed the rear tire, now I'm about half a lap down. And by halfway through the race, I was on the tail of the guy who was leading. I was going to pass him. And then the drive shaft broke. The drive shaft, apparently they had a bad batch. They hadn't been hardened. So the drive shaft broke. And so I didn't finish. Well, I'm naturally, feeling kind of down, pretty blue about that, because winning the Long Beach Grand Prix from an Atlantic standpoint was a big. I mean, they're all good to win, but there are some that are better, and that would have been one of the better ones to win. Well, anyway, Rod walks up and he says, "Hey, tough go today, but Walter wants to see you." So he takes me over to the hotel where Walter was, and I guess Walter had been watching the race with Jackie Stewart, and Jackie said, "Hey, that's the guy you ought to look at," and because they were watching the race. So anyway, Walter calls me over and he says, "I've changed." I'd never met him, so we met, introduced myself, and he did as well. And he goes, we were going to do this test, but I don't want to do it. I want you to drive the car. So I want you to go to Verano to meet Mr. Dallara. When can you be there? Of course, I'm saying like tonight I can be there maybe.
Now.
And then Rod said, by the way, the whole idea with this is, if you perform, you probably would get a ride in a second Wolf at the end of the year. Of course,
that's a pretty big carrot.
That's a big carrot to be dangling in front of a 23-year-old, and 24, I guess, at the time. So in any event, it almost didn't matter that I didn't win the race at that point, and so off I go to Italy and start testing the car at the little track in Verano. I lived in Verano for about 6-7 months that year. Wow. And that stipulated that end goal in sight, that determined which races I would do in Europe. In other words, I would do Formula 3 races where there were Formula 1 races held at the same time to learn the circuits. So I raced at Brands Hatch Grand Prix. I raced Monaco. I raced Nürburgring. Of course, Nürburgring was pretty much done as a Formula 1 race by then. But I still raced Nürburgring. I raced Monza, Jarama, Spain, Dijon, France. Where else did I race in F3? That might have been, as I said, Brands Hatch, Donington.
Oh, we love Donington.
Yeah, and we generally qualified in the top 2 rows in every one of those races. So we had pretty good results. Sometimes not the finishes that we were hoping for, but we were in a one-off car too. Everybody else was in a March or a Chevron or a Ralt, and I'm in the Dallara. And really, to give it all credit, I mean, they did a great job with something kind of an unknown, but in any event, it was a good little team, and from that, they then said, okay, we're going to do the Canadian Grand Prix, U.S. Grand Prix, Watkins Glen, and Canadian Grand Prix, and the first race they had in Montreal.
It was the first one ever, wasn't it? Yeah.
And in fact, Gilles ended up winning the race that year in Montreal, which was a big deal.
Was like Mario not happy because he thought that it had been designed to suit Gilles or something like that? There was some kind of
I don't know about that. It was a miserable weekend. It was cold and and I crashed the one car, the WR5. It was raining unbelievably, and I think I was 5th fastest in the practice session, and I just trying too hard and made a mistake and ended up taking the front corner off. So they dragged WR1 out of a hotel lobby and put an engine in it. And I don't think they expected me to qualify. In those days, they had more cars and qualifying positions available. So But I ended up qualifying towards the back of the grid, but in the race I passed about 6 guys. I was running like P11 or something like that, with a quarter of the distance, and then we had a fuel surge problem mainly because the car had been sitting, nothing had been done to the car.
Sure.
So we didn't finish, but I thought that race we at least showed that we could compete. We'd passed Hunt, we'd passed Peroni, we'd passed Derek Daly, a number of other guys. So I mean, it looked good. Unfortunately, it didn't end well. So that was, and then Dan Peterwar was the team manager at the time, and I'm not sure he was that excited about running 2 cars.
Sure.
And then, of course, they had hired James Hunt. Hunt had left McLaren and went to Wolf, and Hunt said he only wanted 1 car, and of course that means I'm out.
You only get
Which and then I went to F2 and drove for Chevron 79.
Yeah. I just want to backtrack very quickly. I mean, that first Grand Prix you raced was at Watkins Glen. Fantastic circuit, as we know, still is. And again, it comes down to like the human side that I'm quite interested in. Obviously, this is your first Grand Prix. You've impressed. You're there on merit. You're in the second car.
Right.
What was your mindset going into qualifying? And also, did any of the big names, as it were, come over to wish you well? Because I've spoken to a few racers, guys like Alex Caffey and people like that, who have gone in, and they've all said that it's a measure of the real big names who come over and say welcome, or
I knew some of them, from like Patrick Tambay. I'd driven against Patrick in Atlantic and F2 or Atlantic, I should say, by that time. So I knew Patrick, and he was good. I mean, a lot of guys really wouldn't give you the time of day. Like, who are you?
Sure.
And I get it. You kind of have to prove your. I mean, my what if scenario is still. So I'm at the Belgian Grand Prix in '78, just to take a little diversion here, and I was just there to kind of watch the race, see Scheckter, and just hang out. And a guy named Bob Sparshott came up to me, and Bob Sparshott ran an American driver named Brett Lunger.
Yes,
they call it BS Fabrications, Bob Sparshott, and they ran at that time. They ran an M26 McLaren. They had been running an M23. So anyway, he had to. And I saw a picture somewhere. I don't have a picture of me in it, but he said, "Hey, I would really like you to think about. We're looking at doing 5 races with the M23, and I really would like you to think about doing that." So it's like, wow, yeah, let's do that, right? Yeah. So I remember I got in the car, the M23, in my street clothes at Zolder, and I'm like, wow. So I go back to Rod Campbell, Walter's guy, and Rod knew Bob because Rod was running the Chesterfield sponsorship on the BS Fabrications car for Brett Lunger. So in any event, I said, God, Rod, a chance to do all these races in the M23. And Rod said, no, don't. You're going to get your chance. You don't want to go do something and, quote, second-rate team or whatever. And so the guy who took my place was Nelson Piquet. So there you go.
Wow. Okay. Right.
And the rest, I'm not saying I would have ended up a 3-time champion like Nelson Piquet, but it would, and then later on in life, I drove an M23 in a couple of historic car races, and it's like, yeah, this is like an Atlantic car on steroids. I mean, what a great car. And I think the Wolf, the WR5 was a difficult car to drive. It was their shot at a ground effect car, because obviously Mario and Ronnie Peterson in '78 just dominated. When they were running without problems, nobody could touch them. They tried to do that with the Harvey Postlethwaite was a designer at Wolf at the time, and it just. They just kind of missed it a little bit. I mean, Scheckter had a 3rd place in it. I think 1 or 2 races, but it wasn't a load of 79 by any means. And although I will say that the WR1 which Scheckter had done so well in 1977. The first car they had, that car was phenomenal. That was a great car, and that's what I drove at Montreal. And as I say, we passed a bunch of people, and that was just a really nice car to drive. So, in any event, a lot of experience with a lot of interesting people and interesting cars.
Yeah, absolutely, sure. And just quickly on that race at Watkins Glen, your first race, you qualified 20th, pretty good. Yeah. For your first race, you must have been so excited. Your first race, it's as close to a home race as you're going to get. Being just across, being just a couple of states over, isn't it? Up in upstate New York, great circuit, the whole F1 circus, everything around it. You must have been absolutely buzzing on race morning. You must have been so excited / nervous.
Yeah, but I guess for me, my biggest thought was, don't screw up. Don't crash the cars. Don't, just get, and the longest race I'd driven prior to that was a 100-mile Formula Atlantic race, and now you're a 200-mile Formula One race. I think that I probably didn't impress necessarily because I drove a conservative race because I didn't want to make any mistakes, and that's probably again maybe because I was young. As one fellow mentioned, I went from not driving a race car to being an F1 in basically 4.5 years. So, but whereas when I went to Montreal, now that was a whole different. Now more confidence, more everything. But anyway, but I was just glad to finish. Didn't make any mistakes. Maybe not the fastest guy out there by any means, but I didn't do anything stupid. And at least we have that finish under our belt.
Yeah, and walk away with heads held high and all that kind of thing.
But there's no question that to go to. I'll never forget. My girlfriend, the one who had said, you got to go back and give this a shot 2 years earlier, she was with me, and we got up there and it was cold. That time of year in Watkins Glen, first weekend of October is always cold. And we got up there and it was actually snowing. It wasn't sticking, but it was snowing, right? And windy. And all the cars, we went into the garage there, and all the cars that are all covered up, all the teams, there were no, again, Formula One was nothing different. Like you see today. Yeah. I think the racing was better, but all the drama and there's none of that was there. And we go find the cars, and I pulled the engine, I pulled the car cover that they had over the engine, the back of the car, and there's my name on the side of the car, and she started crying. Because she knew, the ups and downs and the difficulties and the sacrifices that you make, and here it is, we're there. And so in any event, it was a hell of a Jim Truman had been one of my sponsors, and then who owned the IndyCar team when I won Indy. He was there with me, and it was a great experience. Not necessarily a successful one, but a great experience.
Yeah, one that you'll always have, of course. And
never forget.
You've had your name on the side of an F1 car. There's not too many can say that. That's very, very cool. Yeah. Just quickly before we get to IndyCar, because I'm wary of time and things, but you said you went back into F2. You drove the works, like Chevron car, and saw some success. And I did have a quick look. You ran well. This is 79. We're into F2 Europe. You got 4th at Silverstone, 5th at Thruxton, which is just down the road from me. Yeah. Very cool, very, very cool, fast circuit. You raced at Vallelunga and Hockenheim and Poe and things like that. Again, you also just love racing these different kinds of circuits in Europe.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and the F2 car drove, aside from the circuits we mentioned with the F3 program, now I'm of course ran Nürburgring in that car. I think I qualified 5th at the ring, and that would have been a time that would have put me 15th on the F1 grid. The F2 cars were pretty quick cars. It was such a shame. Of course, I had known a number of the people at Chevron from Atlantic because they had a lot of business in the States and in North America, Canada, and in Atlantic. And a guy named Dave Wilson was the kind of head of sales for Chevron, and he's the one that kind of enticed me to come over and do this. I had to find some sponsorships, so I went out and borrowed $100,000 to do it, and of course I had to pay that back too, which I did. But
yeah,
I borrowed from 4 people, and they all got their money back. But I met great people over there. Paul Owens, who was really Derek Bennett's kind of right-hand guy. The sad thing is that Derek, who really was Chevron, he was the owner, the designer, he was the guy. He was killed in a hang gliding accident about a month or 2 before I got there.
oh,
So it really Chevron lost its center. It really lost the guy who. I'm sure Brian Redmond would speak very highly of Derek. I'd only met him once, very briefly, in fact. But so I get to Chevron, and it's kind of reeling. The company is on their back foot, and but great people. I lived up near Bolton, lovely part of England, and cold. Cold. Every day I was in there. I was so dedicated to racing that every day I was at the factory and just hanging around or working on the car, polishing the car, or just trying to learn. But yeah, in F2, we ran, of course, Hockenheim, and that was the Hockenheim. It had the little chicane at the end of the loop, but the rest of it was flat out. They didn't have the chicanes in the back straights or on the long straightaways. So that was a heck of an experience, and raced Vallelunga, Mugello. Mugello is a fabulous circuit.
Cool circuit.
So a number of other tracks. I raced just almost every big circuit in Europe. I pretty much raced in between 78 and 79, and that was, once again, for me, just being there racing on those circuits, that was just a dream come true.
Yeah, so right. And just on the subject of circuits, there were 2 that you raced on in endurance racing before we get to IndyCar. One was Daytona, which went quite well, and the other was obviously the 24 hours of Le Mans.
Right.
Obviously, both 24-hour races could not be any more different in terms of circuit or anything like that.
That is for sure. Yeah.
I mean, let's start very quickly with the win at Daytona. Fantastic race. It's to me, it's the curtain raiser of the motorsport season. Fantastic place, fabulous race. You did it with Brian and like some other guys. Just some memories of that. Obviously you won, which helped. Yeah. But that must have been a fantastic.
Yeah. Well, in 1980, I had driven six or so IMSA races. That was the Apple Computer sponsored car.
Yeah, that was the Porsche, wasn't it?
Great looking Porsche 935. Yeah. And
brilliant.
And the team I drove for was a team called Garrettson Enterprises. They were out of Northern California. Very, very good team. Brian had raced for them on many occasions. John Fitzpatrick was their main driver in 1980, and I was kind of like, I was the newbie, the young guy. But in 79, Brian had asked me to do this kind of Formula Libre race. I'm taking myself back calling a race Formula Libre. I don't think they call them that anymore, but that's where different categories race against each other. And we won. This is at Mid Ohio. We won in a 2-liter sports car. And of course, that was my first race. I had known Brian, but that was my first race to drive with him. So we won. And that's when, and then he asked me to, in 81, now we're a year later, he asked if I would drive with him at Daytona and maybe a few other races with Garrettson. So we did. And it was, it was an interesting, I mean, Daytona's so much more, to me, is so much more difficult than Le Mans. At the time at Daytona, the circuit was different than it is today. You didn't have the chicane in the back straight. It was flat from the minute you come out of turn 2 or turn 1, I should say, all the way to back to turn. It's almost the whole lap is flat. Flat out in those things. That was well over 200 miles an hour in a 935 Porsche. But the most difficult part about Daytona is that it gets dark at about 5:30 at night. And so 13, almost 14 hours of the race is in the dark because of being in that time of year.
Yeah.
And whereas at Le Mans, it doesn't get dark till like 11 o'clock at night, and then it's daylight at like 4 o'clock.
You can get 5 hours of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And but then and Daytona generally is really cold that time of year, January. Even though it's in Florida, it still gets cold. But the funny thing with that was there were about 14 or 15 935 Porsches in that race. And they were being driven by, the Whittingtons, who had won Le Mans in a 935, Danny Ongaias, who, had a big name in America.
Yeah, the Flying Hawaiian.
Flying Hawaiian. Of course, Fitzpatrick, a number of guys that raced, Europeans, Americans, you name it. And, of course, it comes to qualifying. I wanted to qualify the car because I'm trying to prove to everybody that, I'm good. And no, Brian's going to drive the car or qualify. So we qualify like 15th. I'm like embarrassed. I'm like, God, that's bad, right? And and Brian knew, he knew, and he said, we're not going to get into what these guys are going to get into, because they're going to go out and they're going to go like hell, and they're going to think they're going to drive it like it's a 2-hour sprint race, and it's a 24-hour race. And sure enough, I mean, he called it. The race starts, and next thing you know, one guy, because if you use too much boost pressure on those cars, the engines would suffer. So anyway, it must have been about, I don't know, 2 a.m. or something, and I'm walking back to my motorhome, which was the backseat of my rental car, and trying to rest, trying to get some sleep. And here comes Brian, and he looks at me. He says, "Where are we?" I said, "We're leading." He goes, "Leading," and he starts giving me a bollocking, like, "I told you, don't race with those guys." And I said, "Brian, I didn't pass anybody. They've all dropped out," and they'd all run themselves into the ground. And I think we won by 8 laps, I think, but I think we led, I want to say, like 14 hours of 24. I mean, we led a lot of the race, and mainly because everybody just, blew their engines up or did something. But again, a great experience with Brian, and so to win that race with him was pretty special.
Yeah, given that it was someone that you kind of looked up to as well, you had the opportunity to do it, which is fantastic. Yeah. Brilliant. I love that. Just quickly want to touch on Le Mans as well, because obviously us Brits over here, we're a bit closer to Le Mans, we know a bit more about it. But spoken to some people who have raced again. As I mentioned in the intro, I've spoken to guys, sort of like Stefan Johansson and like Pirro and Dixon, who have won the thing, and they just say there's nothing like it. It's a fantastic experience. Again, because of the time of year, it's not quite as cold. You get the cool sunsets and the smell of barbecues and everything. And I guess you enjoyed your 2. I mean, obviously, sadly, you didn't quite get to the finish in them, but I guess you enjoyed your 2 runs there in 80 and 82.
Well, I did. 80 more so than 82, really, because we had a car that I think was competitive. But no, Le Mans was. I mean, a number of years ago, I guess I should say, if I have any regret in my career, probably around 1980. I want to say 1988, thereabouts, maybe 89. I decided I would focus. I was doing IMSA races, occasional IMSA races here in the States, in North America. In 87, I did 5 races. I won 3 in second. The other 2, that was in the 962 Porsches.
Nice.
Jochen Mass, God rest his soul, great guy. He and I won Sebring together in 87. But by 89, I thought, I'm just going to focus on IndyCar, because, I just think I should do that, because I was traveling a lot and it was hard with my family, and just thought it was time to do that. Speaking of Jochen Mass, I guess my greatest what if is he was driving for Sauber at the time, and he asked if I would drive with him, and that's the year he won Le Mans. I think it was 89, maybe.
Yeah, in the C9.
And we always had a conflict with Le Mans with the Portland IndyCar race. That was always that weekend in June. So in any event, but I really wished I had, after I retired in 98, I still could have been doing more sports car racing, but I really had just said, no, that's it. I'm a team owner now. I got to be a team owner. I can't be doing, both.
Sure.
But in any event, but no, Le Mans is so cool. I mean, the atmosphere is phenomenal. I'm not a big fan of what they've done to the circuit, but
No,
in fact, I think there are areas that they just absolutely screwed it up. The Dunlop curve was such a great, past the pits and under the Dunlop bridge, and now they've got that. I don't even know what you call it. I don't know how you describe it, but anyway. But I did some vintage car races at Le Mans after I retired from active racing, and it's just a great circuit, great place.
Yeah, fantastic. One of my pals actually went there for the whole week this year, and he hasn't shut up about it since. So, which if he's watching, you know who you are. No, which is fantastic. But right, we've been going for an hour, but we haven't got to IndyCar yet, and my goodness, we have to. I've got so many bits we need to rattle through. Obviously, you said F1 was what you wanted to be at. That probably couldn't happen for a number of reasons. Right. Back to single-seater racing, IndyCar with Jim Truman and True Sports. Just quickly, how did that come about? Because it was the start of a fantastic sort of 7 years for you, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, in '79, just going back a little bit, in '79, and I think it was right after Hockenheim, maybe. Hunt had retired from racing. Maybe halfway through the season.
Yeah, he walked away.
Here I am. Hey, Walter, here I am. I'm ready to step in. Blah blah blah. And I don't think Peter Ward wanted me in the car, to be frank. So I tried to get a ride with Mo Nunn. He had Ensign. And Ensign was owned by a guy named Chuck Jones, who I knew from the States. And Chuck was an American hot rodder and he'd been involved in all kinds of racing. Great guy. And I think Chuck tried to convince Mo to sign me up, and he didn't do it. So Tiff Nadell got the ride, I think. And I think Derek Daly drove it a little bit. But in any event, but it was looking to me that my opportunities in Formula One were probably, slim. And so at the same time, I got a call from a guy named Herb Kaplan, and Herb owned a Can-Am car, and George Fulmer was his driver. And George had been hurt in the car the year before at Laguna Seca and was having an issue. He'd broken his back in the race. And so Herb called me up and said, "Hey, I'd like you to, do a race for me, Watkins Glen Can-Am, and depending on how things go, see where it goes from there." And so I thought, wow, well, here's a opportunity, right? Can-Am was a big deal in the States in those days. So I go to Watkins Glen and I qualified second to KK. He and I were on the front row.
Wow.
And I was running second in the race, and we had a engine issue, but he signed. So I did the rest of the year for him, and I won at Laguna Seca in the car. So now I got Paul Newman asking me to drive the car in 1980. I got Carl Haas, but I'd given my word to Herb, and so I stayed in the States, did Can-Am in 1980. Not a good year at all, with a car that was pretty much outclassed by that time. And but in that time, again, now I'm back here in the States. I'm back with Jim Truman, my longtime sponsor. Jim had finished in '81, had finished third at Indy with Vern Schuppen. And Jim had sponsored Vern. And so, he said, and by that time I was driving for Paul Newman. Midway through '81, I took over for Al Unser Sr. in the March Can-Am car. And anyway, so Jim said to me, "Well, hey, if you're smart, you'll say yes to everything I say." And now, if I didn't know Jim Truman well, I probably wouldn't have. I would have thought about that a little bit longer than I did. But I said yes, whatever it is, yes. And he goes, "I want to start an IndyCar team. I want you to drive the car. I want you to, you got to help find some sponsorship for it." And that was by far the best offer I had at the end of 1981. And so that started me on my IndyCar journey. And I really wasn't, I wasn't that excited about IndyCar for years, but by 1979, 1980, now they're doing more and more road racing.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, I kind of liked, I'd never driven an oval till we went to the first test.
Really?
I'd never driven an oval till we went to the first test we did. And you think it's easy. Oh, it's only 2 left-hand corners. What the hell? It can't be that difficult. And then you get there and it's like, holy smokes, this is a whole different world.
Yeah. There's so many Europeans think, oh, it's just that.
Oh yeah.
No, that drives me up the wall.
Oh no. And I will tell you, the worst experience you can have in a race car is an ill-handling car in an oval. It's just, that race can't get over fast enough if you got an ill-handling car, because it's trying to kill you. It's trying to kill you.
It's got to stick you in.
And so that, in any event, at the end of 1981, we got together with Jim. We started the team. Steve Horn came on as the team manager, and off we went. And that was the start of my IndyCar career.
Yeah, and it was a pretty good start. I saw like 18th on your debut in Phoenix, which is your first race on an oval, which just get in, get finished, get out.
Yeah, well, we didn't even finish. They caught me on fire in the first pit stop.
Okay.
Spilled fuel all over me, and car caught fire, and I got a little bit singed. And so the car was pushed away, and that was that. We were so shell shocked, because everybody on that team that we had at the time, Steve Horn had come from VDS Racing, very good, very good team full of Australians and Kiwis. We thought, like I said, we thought, well, it can't be much to this. And we quickly learned that there's a lot of nuance to turning just left, and a lot of things that you learn from experience. In those days, we didn't have data acquisition, so it was all based on the experience, how much experience the driver had and how much experience the crew chief had. That was everything. That was like your engineer and and what have you. So yeah, we were so shell shocked that we didn't even go to the second race, because the third race was Indy, and and so we had to make sure that we're going to Indy. We need to get our act together. And so even though we didn't finish the Indy, we had a pretty good race, and the rest is history, as they say. But that first race, and it was at Phoenix, and Phoenix was a tough 1 mile oval, very challenging. I'm not sure we started out at the best place we could. No. That was the schedule, right? So
kind of a tricky start, but it was what it was. But you won just your third race in the series. Did you? I hate asking racers this, because it all sounds very rude. But did you see that coming in just your third race and the start that you'd had? Did you think we can win races though?
Well, after, or maybe it was during the month of May. We had nobody had any experience with ovals, and that was kind of the priority. So we hired a fellow named Lee Dykstra, and Lee he was a General Motors engineer. He'd been involved in racing for many, many years. He designed his own cars. He, I don't know if you remember the Group 44 Jaguars when they ran 12-cylinder engines. That was Lee's car. He designed that car. He designed Al Holbert's Can-Am cars. He designed Trans Am cars in the 60s. He'd been around a while, but very, very experienced. And we went to Milwaukee. Was always the race. Milwaukee, a flat 1 mile track, pretty much, was the race that always succeeded Indy. And so we go there, and all of a sudden it's like, well, wow, this car feels. Compared to Phoenix, it was like totally different. And we actually, I think we qualified fourth, maybe, which was pretty good. And we're having a good race. I think we're running second, third, fourth in that area. And then the right rear suspension collapsed, halfway, 2/3 of the way through the race. And that was that. We didn't finish, but left there thinking, okay, this feels pretty good. Well, now the next race was Cleveland. That was a road course. Now I'm back in my element, right? Now I'm on a road course. And with Lee's engineering capabilities, we went from being a car that was struggling to again, I think we qualified maybe third, something like that, and ended up winning the race. And then later on that year, I mean, that was a great win for us. But for me, the most important win that year for us, we had 2 wins in 9 races, was we won at Michigan, the high banked oval at Michigan at the end, towards the end of the year.
The oval.
And to win on an oval, that to me was, I mean, you look at the beginning of the year versus the end of the year, and just this tremendous curve of performance increase and what have you.
Yeah.
And so ended up being rookie of the year, finished second in the championship to Rick Mears. In the end, it was a pretty good year, but you would never have known by the start of the year they would be such.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess from you kind of touched on it, from where you started to where it finished. I mean, second behind, Rick Mears, who knows a thing about IndyCar.
And about ovals, especially. Yeah.
Ovals, he was like well, he's known as like the king of the ovals, or like the specialist, or just like the man when it comes to ovals. But he was good on other things as well. But
he was good. He was good on road courses, but on ovals, he really. And again, I think, it's like anything. You don't do it yourself. You got to have the support system. You have to have the mechanics, the engineers, the money. You got to have it all, and that's even more apparent on ovals than I think it is on road courses.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everyone I've spoken to who's raced on an oval, that's something that they always lean on. It's you need people around you. Yeah. Alex Tagliani spent about an hour and a half talking about ovals because of that, which was fantastic. The insights he had. But I want to move on to 1983, and anyone who tunes into these knows how obsessed I am with the Indy 500. Even if I'm talking to someone who rides bikes, I somehow mentioned the 500. It was your first time there as a driver. Obviously, back then it was a proper full month of May and everything about it. As I said, I went in 2022, and I'd blown it up in my head as being this incredible thing, and it was even better than I had imagined. As a driver there for the first time, did you have that kind of sense of, holy smokes, this is something else?
Well, actually, my rookie year was 82, and they used to have a thing called rookie orientation, where they would maybe put I think it was only a single day test, but they'd get the rookies, and without anybody else on the track, let you run around. Well, again, it's kind of like that Watkins Glen Formula One race. I get there. It had to have been in early May, or maybe it was late April. Get there, it's cold, it's snowing. And Indianapolis it looks like a battleship. It looks like a U.S. Navy, aircraft carrier or whatever, because it's that gray, that navy gray. Everything is gray.
Yeah.
The grandstands are gray. everything is just gray. And so I'm going out there, and you drive in, and it's pretty, at least for me, I think anybody else would tell you they're lying, but it's pretty intimidating, when you see it like that. And it was cloudy and cold and gray and just, God. Then you get in the car and as I've told people, every car I ever drove, whether it was a Formula One car, a 935 Porsche or 962 Porsche, at some point they always stopped accelerating. They kind of hit that wall. And the Indy car was the first car I driven that never stopped accelerating. And that opens your eyes, right? At least at that time. And it was kind of intimidating, and and of course all they do, the veterans who were there, all they do is keep telling you, hey, if your butt says the car doesn't feel right, believe it. Don't ignore what your butt's telling you, because that, forget your head, forget your heart. It's, the pucker factor, they call it, right? Where you go, and it's true, man. You got to respect that. And so if there's one thing I have to say, there are a lot of tracks I drove on, I probably didn't really respect them per se. But Indy, you better respect Indy, because if you don't, it's going to bite you.
Yeah. Was it Mario said there's 2 kinds of drivers, isn't there? Those who are crashed at Indy and those that are going to.
Yeah, right. Exactly. They call it sheet time. Have you had cheat time yet? No. What do you mean? Well, have you been in the hospital yet because of Indy? No, I haven't been there yet. Well, you will be. So just, I mean, but that's right. That's right. Mario said it best. It's it's yeah, it's just it's intimidating. It's intimidating.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just kind of blows your mind in so many different ways. The whole place. It's just it's incredible. And I mean, you put it on the outside of row 2 on your first Indy 500. Right. Not bad. It's pretty good. I mean, I did have a look at who was on the on the grid, who you were next to. I did have a look. It was Tom Sneaver and Al Jr., wasn't it? Al Jr., Al Senior.
Al Senior, yeah.
I think so. Some good company to be keeping. And I just want to talk about from the driver's point of view about the atmosphere. The first, with all the pomp and ceremony and everything that goes on before the race and everything. I mean, it's incredible, isn't it? I mean, when you're in the middle of it for your first Indy 500, are you just looking around thinking, this is unreal?
Well, and remember, as you said, a little while ago, in those days, you were there for 4 weeks. You were there the entire month of May, every day running, looking for, the smallest improvements in speed or whatever the case may be. And as I always told people, when you left, the sky at the end of each day, the sky was bluer and the grass was greener, because, at times you kind of have to go past your comfort level just to see what the car will do. And then you just hope that you're going to catch it if it starts to get away from you or whatever. So every day, that's the way it was for, 21 days before before you even got on the race, got to the race, Actually, the race I thought was, to me, qualifying was far more pressure packed than the race. It was 4 laps, the average speed over 4 laps. It's crazy now how close it is, but even in those days, it was, especially up towards the front of the grid, it was quite close. So, a little lift, a miniature lift in the corner could take you from row 1 to row 3. Sure. And okay, come race day, does that really matter? Probably not, but still, you want to do as well as you can. And so I just thought, I always thought qualifying was more stressful that weekend, the qualifying day, than the race. The race, it's kind of fun because there's so much. The people start coming into the circuit around 5 a.m. and you don't see those gray grandstands anymore because they're full of people wearing different colored shirts and different colored pants, and so the place is just like color, like you can't believe. And there's this buzz, there's just this hum, which is just people talking in their normal voice, but you got 350,000 of them, so it's like this loud hum, right? Yeah. And so race day, and of course also you're glad because you're finally going to, no more practice, you're finally going to get on with it. So yeah, I really like race day. That's pretty fun, pretty exciting.
Yeah, sure. And the race went actually pretty well that first experience there, and you're running up at the top and pretty solid. Unfortunately, there was was it a radiator issue, wasn't it? It got a punctured radiator, which you retired with. Obviously disappointing, but showing that you could do it at the 500, must have been a real shot in the arm. Excuse me. What do you got here? There was. Let's have a quick look. I just want to skip forward, actually. 84 and 85, there was some gradual progression in the team, and the new cars and a few little tweaks and changes and getting more comfortable. And did you feel like something was building in those kind of 2 years before things really exploded for you? Did it feel like things were building?
Well, for sure. 84 was, of course, as many people know, in 1984 and 85, Adrian Newey was my engineer.
Yes.
And, we like to say we taught Adrian everything he knew. Or everything he knew. But Adrian was a young guy on loan to us from March Engineering. And Adrian and I just developed this really close relationship. I think we communicated better than a married couple. It's like he'd finish sentences for me and I'd finish them for him. And we spent a lot of time together. And talked racing and by that time, my guys who that 82 the 82 team was still there and now a lot more experienced, and could also, shed light on things and provide insights into, their experience at that point in time. So 84, the start, and again, one of those things that as the year went on, got better and better because, he really turned the 84 car into a race winner.
Yeah.
And at that time, the Lola in 84 was the car to have. And then, of course, 85, I think we had 10 pole positions. We won, I think, 3 races in 85. We won 2 in 84. But yeah, Adrian, the whole team was really clicking by that time. And then, of course, Adrian leaves, goes to one of my nemesis, Michael Andretti, like Craco. And it's like, what, how can we let him go? How can we let Adrian Newey go? Well, but the guy who assumed his place had been working under Adrian, a guy named Grant Newberry, really sharp guy. And he ended up leading us to 500 victory, championship in 86, championship in 87. So in the end, we didn't really suffer too much, but for sure by 84, 85, now we were a consistent front runner in IndyCar.
Yeah. And you were taking up the title battles too, guys like Mario and Thompson Eva
Right.
and the Andrews and things like that. And finished third, I think 84, 85 in the overall standings.
Championship, yeah. Fifth in 84. No, fifth in 83. Fifth in 83. Third in, I think we were third in 84.
Yeah.
I said third in 85. We were in the hunt for the championship in 85. And Jacques Villeneuve, Gilles' brother, took me out at a race in Canada, and that was a difference for us. But again, we won a lot of races, and we're on pole position quite a bit in 85, and pretty competitive year.
Yeah, and obviously in a good place going into 86, and 86. As years go, it's not too bad. It was, I don't even know where to start with it. It kind of. Again, it all seemed to start at Indy that kind of year, a fairly sort of slow start. But you were fourth? I think you qualified fourth. Was it Rick Mears and Danny Sullivan, Michael Andretti?
Right.
What a top four that is. You're obviously confident going into the race.
Yep.
Excuse me. And rolling off from fourth. You had like your own strategy, I guess, and how you were going to go against it. It's easier said than done staying out of trouble at Indy, but I guess you were confident that if you could stay out of trouble, avoid any issues, avoid those big concrete bits at the side, then you'd be in a good spot come the end.
Yeah, because we'd done a lot of practicing, and again, we're running full fuel. In those days, we ran with 40 gallons of fuel. Today, they're running with 18, I think it is. So big difference. Big difference in how the car handled from heavy fuel to light fuel. So you really worked on your car to, what part of each run did you really want your car to be its best? And we tended to focus more on the second half of the fuel run rather than the first half. And I think that paid off for us. Yeah, we'd suffer a little bit after every stop, maybe, not quite as good as Rick, for example. But then after half tanks on, we were probably better than Rick. And of course, again, we had done a lot of running to get a good feel for the car. And I think the best thing that happened that day for us is that we had a car that responded to changes. Sometimes you get in the race like that, the track changes all the time. Temperature changes, it can be sunny and hot, and then it can cool off. And, so you get swings in how the car responds based on all these environmental issues, factors. But the car, and sometimes when it's like that, no matter what you do to the car, it doesn't make any difference. It is what it is. But in this case, the car responded reasonably well. So we could kind of tune ourselves, up when we needed to. And that was a big plus for us, for sure. And I think we saw that at the end of the race, because I set the fastest lap of the race on the last lap of the race. And that's just because the car was in a good window to be able to do that.
Yeah. Which is obviously absolutely vital. I mean, it was basically you, Rick Mears, and Kevin Cogan were just at it the entire race. I've watched the whole
Right.
thing back, and you were just, it was going to be one of you three right at the end there. And I think Kevin got past, he was ahead. Were you a bit concerned that you weren't going to be able to catch him before Mr. Lyndike had his little spin?
Yeah, well, yeah, I was concerned because we had, 7 laps to go, maybe 8 laps when Ari crashed. Luckily, he didn't crash too badly, so it was a quick cleanup. And
Yeah.
But having said that, I felt we were faster than Kevin. He was using a really high line to get the speed out of his car, and that's great. But it doesn't take much. If you get a little too high, you lose the front or whatever, then you have to get out of the throttle. Then you're kind of sunk. So I felt that if we could get, then we're going to have to restart. And I felt if we could get a good restart, we had a good chance, and certainly that's what happened. And I think if you look at the restart, he took he covered more ground doing that to do that restart than I was able to take a tighter exit off the corner, and that really gave me a good run. It freed the car up sooner so that it accelerated quicker, and we were able to go on and win it, which was huge for all of us, particularly given the fact that Jim Truman would soon be passing away, because it was clear he was not going to make it much longer.
Yeah, he was.
That race. And, so as I tell people, to realize a dream for somebody else is pretty special.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you kind of touched on that. I mean, I always remember I had Eddie Cheever on here, and he said as soon as he got into the lead a dozen years later in '98, he said there wasn't any thought of nursing the car or anything. It was just go.
Yeah.
You set the fastest lap on the last lap of the race. I guess you were the same. You was like, right, let's just go and let's go and win this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's your chance, right? You got to take. I think drivers, as a driver, you have to be opportunistic, right? You have to, when opportunities present themselves, if you don't, you got to take it. And as I say, I think there's always been drivers. I think every driver at some point in his life, the door opens, and if you walk through it, you're good for the rest of your career. And if you don't, you never get that chance again. Yeah. And Kevin Cogan being one of them. And there are others. There are others that were in great positions to win not just Indy but any race. And then for whatever reason, J.R. Hillebrand a couple of years ago, had that race won. All he had to do was get around turn 4 and tripped up over a lap car, and that was that.
Yeah, and, I actually had JR on here, and it's amazing how pragmatic he is about it. He said, "Well, as soon as I saw the lap car, that car slowing, I knew I was going to hit the wall because I couldn't. There was nothing I could do. I had to go outside him." And I just think, how can you be so calm? But goodness me,
I wouldn't.
I would have hit the roof. But quickly from the fans' point of view, to me, there can be no better feeling than winning the Indy 500, crossing the bricks and the milk and the interview, and the reef and everything. I mean, you must have, that must have just been the most incredible feeling.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a little unreal. It's a little bit, you win it, and of course it gives you instant credibility, at least over in the United States. Everybody, now you know everything. You're smarter than everybody. You're better looking than everybody. That's the impact that Indy has a tremendous impact on a driver's career. Yeah. So I think it's you kind of went home and back to the hotel, and you had to pinch yourself. Hey, this isn't a dream. This just happened. And very special. And so glad so happy that I could say I'm a 500 winner. After I went back to my hotel, and I was my father, who usually came to a lot of races, didn't come. He just had back surgery, and he wasn't happy with me because I was building a house in Ohio, in Columbus, Ohio, and he thought that was pretty silly. Like, why do you need a big house and all this other stuff? And anyway, but I'm reflecting. I'm on. I call him up. He's at home in Chicago. And I'm thinking about, how we got here. Here we were not that long ago. We were at Mid-America Raceway in St. Louis, Missouri, driving a 7-year-old Lotus. And now here I am. I just won the biggest race, and one of the biggest ones in the world for sure.
Yeah.
And, and it just seemed like, wow, what a journey it had been. And,
yeah.
And, so I called him, I said, Dad, so what do you think? What do you think? And he goes, well, at least you can pay for that house now. That's typical father, typical parent, right? But I think that term, that word journey, it just seemed like that. Yeah, my God, what a journey it had been to that point. And that journey continued for, 12 more years.
Yeah.
So, as far as being a driver, and with a few more wins under my belt, and a lot of what could have been. There were a couple of times we were leading Indy, and then had mechanical issues. So it was just an amazing experience, and every time I get to Indy, even today, it still is an amazing experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm very aware of the time. I just want to touch a couple of things. That year, obviously, you did win the championship that year as well. Right. I mean, to win the 500 and the title in the year, it doesn't get any better than that. And obviously, when Michael dropped out late on, didn't he? Was it Laguna? I can't remember where it was. Was it in?
No, it was Miami,
Florida.
Miami,
yeah. And he dropped out. You must have. Did you just allow yourself just to go? Okay, we can just get to the end, and we can.
Yeah, that was pretty much. That was, I was racing one car, and that was Michael. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, and we were ahead of him, but Michael's a good driver, and you can't, it's never over till it's over, right? So you can never assume anything, and. But yeah, we were very fortunate to win. We won 6 races that year, so as well. So, in fact, we won 3 races in a row towards the end of the championship. So it was a great year, but then it was offset by Jim Truman's death, and so it was just as I say, thankfully he was able to see a win at Indy before he passed on.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, very bittersweet. And 87, you went to defend the title. You did it. There was a target on your back as the champion. Did that kind of change the way you went about things, or was it a case of, look, let's just do what we did before?
Well, yeah. I mean, although I tell people, and they kind of think it's maybe a little bit odd, but every race I went into, I felt like I had to prove myself. Wow. I could have won Indy the weekend before, but I go to the next race and it's like, okay, well, now what are you going to do? That was then. This is now.
Right.
And so I never, as I say, I never assumed anything. I always ran a little bit scared, ran hungry, as they say, where you just feel like you got to do it. You got to prove it all over again. And I think that's what kept me where that accounted a lot for, the attitude going into race weekends, the approach to a new year. It was like, what happened before is ancient history. Now what are we going to do? So that was kind of the driving force for me.
Yeah, that's a great way to approach it. And obviously it worked in 87. You won the championship. Ironically, it was Mario who dropped out when you were battling Michael for the championship. But two-time champion. So to fast forward very, very quickly, you switched teams. So you decided to set up your own team, Team Rahal in 92.
Right.
That's a big thing. Did it feel, because you picked up the Patrick Racing assets, didn't you, from Patrick Racing?
Right.
I mean, obviously they had some good stuff there. They were a race-winning team, but you turned it into something very, very good in 92.
Well, they had, I mean, people would say, well, are you ever going to start your own team? And I'd say, like, why would I want to do that?
Right.
But I ended up, frankly, right around 1990, 91, or 90, 91, I'm now getting up close to 40 years old. And I had seen drivers kind of be retired. They seemed to think it was before they were ready to be retired, but teams wouldn't hire them. And I wanted to really kind of control my, my career. And so the way to do that is to own the team or co-own the team, whatever the case may be. And at the same time, Patrick team, they had not, the sponsor had demanded Chevrolet engines, Ilmor engines, and they couldn't get them. And so the sponsor, Miller Brewing Company, said, well, they had an out in the contract if they couldn't get it. And so they couldn't get it. So they left. And then they called me up and said, hey, if you can get an Ilmor, we'd love to sponsor you,
Right.
yeah, we'd love to help you start a team. So, okay. So I called up Ilmor, Mario Ilian, and Paul Morgan, and you can. We'll lease you an engine. So off we went. And next thing you know, I've got a multi-year arrangement with Miller Brewing Company that lasted probably about 13 years or so. At that, in the end. So yeah, but having said that, in '92. It was a great little team that Patrick had put together. They had Jim McGee, probably one of the most experienced, successful crew chiefs, team managers in IndyCar history. I mean, he'd worked for Penske for many years. He worked for a guy named Clint Bronner, that's who Andretti, Mario, started driving for. So Jim McGee was like God, and he was a great advocate for the team. I mean, he led the team beautifully. And as a single car team, we went out and we won 4 races that year in '92. And it was just a really well-run team, and with good mechanics and good funding and everything else. So it was a great year for us. For me, it was a very enjoyable year because everywhere we went, we were pretty competitive.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously being like an owner, driver, and having the success, winning the championship. I mean, you must have been you must have been a very proud guy at the end of that year to have done, you kind of 86, you've won the championship in the 500, 92, you've won the championship 4 races, you've survived the 92 Indy 500, which was great, which was all you could do. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that must have been a very, very proud year.
Well, it was because, of course, everybody said, well, you can't own a team and drive the car too, because you'll never give 100%. You'll always be afraid of crashing and costing money that you don't have. But I know, that never even crossed my mind. And, and of course, Foyt, he always owned his team. And even Mario owned his team at one point back in the 60s. But, I think, it was a great car, the Lola car. I really, really loved it. The Ilmor engine was a good engine that year. The team was very good direction, good people within it. Just kind of everything came together, and it was, and even on top of that, so I was voted driver of the year twice. That was an award given, determined by the motor racing press here in the United States. And you were up against anybody from any discipline in racing, whether it's stock car racing, motorcycle, IMSA, you name it. And I won in '86. It used to be called the Martini and Rossi Award. It was a big deal because it was voted on by the motor racing press. And so I won in '86, and then I won in '92. And '92 I felt particularly proud because, now it was our team, and it was, people said you couldn't do it, and we showed them you can. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And then for that to be recognized by others as well. And it's a big thing. I'm just going to rattle on very, very quickly. I mean, there's so much we could talk about, but we haven't got the time. But you kind of went through, from there, '93, through you kind of got close to more championships, now some podiums and wins and everything else like that. But I was going to fast forward to '98 when you decided that enough was enough. Unfortunately, there was one. You had one accident, I remember. Was it at Motegi that unfortunately ended up
'98?
On your side and everything. Not what you want in your final year, but I mean, had you decided that was going to be your final year of racing, or was it just the way that '98 went?
No, I decided. I actually was initially planned to retire in '97, and I was talking to Dario Franchitti, and I said, "Hey, if you come drive for me, I'll retire for '97. That way, that way you could drive in '97." And said, and that never worked out. But the reason I knew it was time was because earlier in my career, I couldn't wait to go testing. I couldn't wait to, I was just so focused. So, you had blinders on. And then now I'm 97. I'm 44 years old. Now I have a couple automobile dealerships. I have a family. And it just struck me one day when we were going to go do a test somewhere. And I felt like it was work. It never felt like work before. Right. And this time around, I felt like it was work. And it just dawned on me that, well, if I'm not going to give it 100% commitment, then there's no point in doing it. And so that's what really drove me to make the decision to retire when I did. Was just the fact that it was this self-realization that I wasn't ready to sacrifice everything for the racing. And to me, if you're not ready to do that, then time to go on.
Yeah, sure. I think you became, obviously by this point, Mr. Letterman's come on board, and it's that and that's expanded and things like that. Excuse me. Oh, okay. Very, very quickly, because I know we push for time. Andrew Bishop, hello, Andrew, says, "What are your thoughts on what our Nigel did in 1993?" We've got to ask about Nigel.
It was interesting because Nigel went on the ovals. He didn't win any of the road courses.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he won at surfers, didn't he? And then it was all ovals.
He did win surfers, but everything else was on the ovals. Yeah. He was with Newman Haas Racing. Was a tremendous team at the time, and so he took advantage of everything that was there, and obviously was a damn good driver. He and Mario didn't get along, but
so I hear.
Aside from that, but Nigel is, and of course, and that he did great things for IndyCar racing because, that's when I think Bernie was really getting a little bit nervous about IndyCar. The TV ratings were pretty strong in Europe and especially England, and of course, more and more people were coming over to IndyCar. Emerson came over in 83, I think it was. You were getting a lot of Europeans coming over, and even still are today, because there's a lot of opportunity here that they couldn't get in F1. And so, Nigel, he brought a lot to the party by driving an IndyCar in those 93 and 94.
Yeah, certainly did. Okay, very quickly, we'll talk about obviously being a team owner. You've gone from, you said you weren't ready to risk it all out on track. I guess, did that make it a bit easier when you were on the other side of the pit wall with the nerves and everything? You were like, okay, I kind of step back a little bit.
Now I worry about crashes, but mainly because I'm not in control, right? The driver's in control.
That's the control thing. Yeah.
No, I think I'm glad I had the ability to segue from one. Motor racing's been my entire life. In terms of whether it was a spectator, as a young boy watching my dad race at Road America in 1958 till today. I've always said to people, I'm foremost a fan. That's I'm a fan of racing, and I love racing. And I'm very passionate about it, and that hasn't lessened over the years. So I'm lucky that I'm able to live my passion. It's in a different way, with different responsibilities, but I'm able to stay in the sport that not only has meant so much to me professionally, but personally has done so much for me and my family and my life and what have you. So, people say, "Well, when are you going to retire?" And I said, "I'm never going to retire. I'm going to probably die at a racetrack. Not wake up one morning or something like that, because that's I'm 72 years old now. Wow. I'm not going to go sit. What am I going to do? I'm not going to go sit on the beach. This is my life. So, it is what it is."
Yeah, very cool. Because you mentioned about like the family and everything, your family's life. I've got to mention this because I see a lot of rubbish being spoken about. Obviously, you've been team owner and your son Graham driving and things like that, and it's all very up in the air from people that haven't got a clue. But I mean, it must be very difficult having Graham racing for you because he's your son and you want him to be safe, but you want him to give it everything and go and.
Well, you want him to achieve the success that I know he can achieve. He drove for Newman Haas, and he drove for Chip Ganassi, right? Yeah. Before he ever drove for us. And, we've even saw this year again, you give him a good car and And, at Indianapolis, he basically dominated the race ahead of Palou until they made a bad strategy call on the last stop and put tires that Palou had better tires on. That was that. So, you give him a good car, he's there. He did the same thing this year at Portland. Had a strong race, even though he qualified. He had an incident in qualifying. I think it was 21st. He ended up 4th in the race, and that's not by driving around. They had a good car, but he drove hard too. But yeah, I think the thing the pressure I feel is if we don't deliver to him like you do for any driver, but particularly when it's your son. I feel like I really let him down. And, a couple of years ago, he was in position to win the 500 and they didn't put the wheel on correctly. And the wheel came off, come out of the pit lane. And that was that.
And he was my pick. He was my pick that year. And I was like, no, because I really thought he was on it, wasn't he? He was really on.
Yeah. So, I really feel that, we've let him down, but he can still stand on the gas. And so it's, hopefully this year we'll get him some more wins.
Yeah, absolutely right. Just very quickly, 2 people I have to talk about because they've been on here for chats. 2 weeks ago, I had Kenny Brack on. We love Kenny. Kenny lives just down the road. He's a brilliant guy. To come back from what he came back from was unreal, wasn't it? Absolutely unreal.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was a freak accident, or the outcome was a freak occurrence, wasn't it? And
Kenny, most mortals would never have would have perished in that accident that he had in Texas, and then to see him come, but that Kenny's determination is so strong, that he, he's when he commits himself to something, it's, there's no such thing as 110% except in Kenny. I mean, he just makes a commitment that's just kind of superhuman. I love Kenny. He's a great guy. We still see each other a lot. But yeah, to go from that big accident and then 6 months later to have the fastest qualifying time at Indy, that was pretty amazing, and that's testament to him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think if Kenny Brack wants to do something, Kenny Brack's going to do it. One more guy I have to talk about, one of my favorite human beings on the planet, Takuma Sato. What a guy. I mean, he's almost 50. He still talks like he's an excited 7-year-old every time he's near a car. He came on here.
Yeah, I mean, the day after the race this year, he calls me up. He goes, I'm doing this again next year. Okay, all right, Takuma. Yeah, he's like a young guy. I mean, he's got the mentality or the attitude of a young guy, and I'll tell you what, he can do. He's discovered a shortcut around Indianapolis. I don't know where it is, but I mean, he's fast. And that qualifying run that he did this year to get middle of the front row was phenomenal. And so we're expecting him back next year. And
brilliant.
You say 50 years old, but he sure doesn't act 50.
No, absolutely right. And I said the only shame about 2020 is there wasn't a massive crowd for him to jump into or whatever he was going to do, because that was, I was ecstatic when he went out. I was so pleased. It was brilliant.
Yeah, when we drove in that month of May, I said to the guy in the car with me, I said, watch, this is the race we're going to win. There's nobody here, and the prize money's been halved. And sure enough, we won the race. So,
of course, but
a win is a win,
and you've won it as a driver and as a team owner, which that's a very, very cool thing.
Yeah.
Okay, one thing I have to ask before we get into some very tiny little bits, just to wind down, because it's been nearly 2 hours. I do apologize. Yeah. Everyone in the comments, Keith Mal and everyone else, is talking about Jaguar, Adrian Newey, all that kind of thing. How close did it come to being a thing?
There was an agreement.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I'm not going to dig any further, but if there's an agreement, that's pretty close. So, okay. Yeah. Wow. That would have been cool. Wow.
Yeah. I think I've been very cool, but I think there were so many extenuating circumstances that frankly, I understand, why Adrian did what he did. Because I think that he saw what was going on, and it was just there were too many cooks spoiling that broth. And I think he saw that, and of course, Ron Dennis took advantage of that, and I think in the end, Kenny did Adrian did the right thing for him.
Sure. Sure.
Then it was obviously then ironic that here's Red Bull at the old Jaguar Racing headquarters, but in the end, I think that Adrian did the right thing, for him and for his future, because it was just as I say, there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen at that time.
Yeah. No, sure. Say no more. Fair enough. No, that's great. Okay, I mean, we could talk IMSA all day. Like I should say, we had like Nick Yellowly was on here, and I saw him the other week. And
Nick's a good man.
Nick said, hello, he's a good guy. I've got a lot of time, Nick. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
I saw him at Silverstone for the European Le Mans, and he said, and I mentioned you were coming on, and he said to say hello. So, okay, very, very quick, just some little bits, just fun things to run down, because I know you're very, very busy, and you've been very gracious with your time. Firstly, big subject, but 1994, the split, it wasn't good, was it? What a mess.
No. And 95 was the split. Yeah, 95.
95, sorry. And it was just a huge mess, wasn't it? And it wasn't a good look, but it's finally been sorted out, and IndyCar's in a good place, isn't it?
IndyCar today is as good as it ever was in many respects, maybe better in some respects. Do we have 2 tire companies in it? No. Do we have 3 engine manufacturers in it? No. Currently, we got 2, and we got 1 tire company. But you look at the crowds at the races; they're as big or bigger than they've ever been before. Indy really has the mojo back, as we would say. We've got some amazing races coming up this year. Arlington, Texas is going to be phenomenal.
Yeah.
I just think Indy's in a really good. The fact that Fox TV bought into Penske Entertainment. That's huge for us because, they're going to invest in the series, and because for them to make money, they have to. So I just think IndyCar in the last, to be frank, had Roger not bought IndyCar when he did, I don't know if IndyCar would have survived, the pandemic. I don't know if it would survive 2020. But thankfully he did buy it, and I'm sure he. He woke up one day and said, "What in the hell did I just do?" But I think IndyCar is really in a pretty darn good spot, and it's just going to get better and better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I keep saying it's the best race series in the world, and I'm not having anyone tell me any different.
No.
Okay, very, very quickly. You think we mentioned earlier, but I always ask these fun little questions at the end. Did you have a favorite driver growing up, and is there anyone that you particularly admire now?
Jim Clark was my hero. Probably Dan Gurney, a close second to Jim Clark.
Yeah.
Is there anybody I admire now? Well, I'm 72 years old, but I have to say I'm impressed with Verstappen. Obviously, he's damn good. Now, again, the problem in Formula One is the technology plays such an overwhelming influence on the performance of the cars. Yeah. So it's really hard to tell. But I think you put him in anything, he's going to be fast for sure. But I don't know if there's. I admire. Look at what Palou's done this year. Not his first year in IndyCar, but from year 2. But then he's been with the best team in IndyCar racing since that time. Sure. And again, it's all about, they say it takes a village. That's the same thing in racing. You got to have all the pieces have to be working in harmony and together. That's success. Yeah. He can drive, but he's also driving the best car out there. And so, there's always, you have to admire the success, but you also have to look a little deeper than just the finishing record.
Yeah, for sure. Good answer. I like that. Okay. Did you have a favorite car that you've ever raced and a favorite circuit to race on?
As I said, people ask me about my favorite car. My favorite car was the last race I won in. What car was that? So. But I in particular, I like the 962 Porsche. I thought that was a great car to drive.
Yeah.
And probably my 92 Lola was, I think, we kind of, that car and I kind of, we clicked together. And particularly on the ovals, because we won 3 of the 4 1-mile tracks. Yeah, I think that car, but I could also say the same thing for the 87 Lola, and I could say the same thing for, the Reynard I had in 96 was a darn good car. So I don't, there's, but all kidding aside, I mean, you always feel strongly about the cars that you win races in.
Yeah, sure. Just on that 92 Lola, I've actually got a little model of it just over there because it's a cool
There we
looking
go.
car as well. It's very, very cool. Did you have a favorite circuit that you enjoyed racing on, or was it just the ones that you won on?
No, but my favorite circuit was Road America, and I never won an IndyCar race there. I finished second there a couple times, but
Great circuit.
I feel so fortunate to have driven, the Nürburgring. What a track, right? Or so I'd say Nürburgring would be number one, and I'd put Road America up against any European circuit, frankly. Because I think 4 miles long and got a little bit of everything. Then of course Laguna Seca, I had a lot of success at Laguna Seca. So, probably just from an experience standpoint, I'd say Nürburgring. But from a everyday, I love going to this place. That would be Road America in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I'd love to go there. Okay, 2 more things. Have you? What's your proudest moment on track and off it?
Oh, proudest moment would be probably winning the championship in '92. I'd say. Because as I say, most people said it couldn't be done. And then off the track, proudest moment is having a great family that I have, and still being involved in the business, the sport. More, I look at it more. I tell people, I'm very fortunate because my avocation is my vocation. Right. This is it's my hobby, it's my love, it's my passion, but it's also my livelihood. And there aren't many people that can make that claim about whatever they do. So that's probably my proudest moment.
That's fantastic. Love that. Okay, this is the last one. It's a horrible question. I ask it to everyone. I don't know why, because there's no answer to it. But you've shared the track with some amazing races in various disciplines. So I'm just going to name just a few here. Guys, like Scott Brayton is very sadly not with us, but guys like Derek Daly and the Bettenhausens, and you've shared the track with like Rutherford and John Sullivan, Tracy Goodyear, Stefan Johansson, Scott Pruitt, who's won everything in everything. Zanardi, Gilles de Ferran, Mansell, Piquet, Fittipaldi, Franchitti, Scheckter, Hunt, Peroni, Rosberg, Warwick, Bell, Hans Stuck, Mears, Mass, the Unzers, Andretti's, Villeneuve, etc., etc. I mean, goodness me, quite a roll call of people you've raced against. I mean, is there anyone who has stuck out in your mind? Maybe not as being the best or anything else, but has just stuck out as being different.
Well, for me, it's interesting. So when I came into IndyCar in '82, now I'm racing against guys that have been in IndyCar since the mid '60s. Gordon Johncox, the Johnny Rutherfords, the Marios, Bobby. Well, Bobby Unser retired the year before I came in, but you're racing against guys that you've read about for years, and they really take on a bigger than life kind of persona, because of the success they've had or the experiences they've had. But to me, the guy that if I would look at somebody as being the yardstick, for me it was Mario. That if I beat Mario on any given day, I felt like I really did a good job that day. And I may not say that about everybody else, even though I'd won the race, but Mario, to me, he's just the example. He's the yardstick. And I would say Mario was the guy.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people I've spoken to have said that Mario was the guy. And certainly because he's a little bit older, he probably doesn't get the credit from my generation and the ones since. But
Mario brought and he still has it today. Talk about passion. He has a passion for it that, is, I think, frankly, in some respects, maybe unequaled. at least in the people I know, and yeah. So to me, if you beat Mario on any given day, you've just done a hell of a job.
Yeah, absolutely right. And just on that word passion, I think a great way to finish is to say incredible what you've created, with your team across the various different series, the opportunities you've given to young drivers, loads of other drivers that I did have on my list, but we ran out of time to talk about. And yeah, it's absolutely incredible what you've achieved and what you continue to do for motorsport. So yeah, thank you for giving us what you've given us as well.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Nice being with you.
Fantastic. Guys, thank you for all the comments and the questions. I have seen them, and we've covered it all, I think. Thank you very much for all your support. We'll be back next week with number 200, unbelievably. But huge, but biggest thanks, of course, go to you, Bobby. Personally, it's been an absolute honor speaking with you. I have, 7-year-old me would never have thought I'd get to speak to you. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, glad it happened then.
Yeah, and I'm very grateful for you to spare over 2 hours of your time. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Great stuff. We wish you all the best for next season and beyond as well. Guys, thank you very much, and we'll see